So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. This is a very different setting for the kind of workshops or training we're used to give. I'll try to make it as interactive and as fun as possible in the 30 minutes I have at my disposal. So my name is Andrea Boccuni. I am a corporate lobbyist, and I'm here to present The Good Lobby. Now, The Good Lobby is a civic startup that wants to empower citizens with professional tools that comes, for example, from the corporate world. So I'll try today to nail two important points, or something that I'd like to argue in this specific venue. Point one, lobbying is not bad in and out of itself. It's just a tool. It's just a tool that may be used by different actors for different purposes. The second point is that when we empower people with tools such as those of lobbying, we might have better policy making, more inclusive discussion, and more transparent relations with politicians and institutions. Now, before I go through it, I also understand that the concept of lobbying itself can be misunderstood or is absolutely badly perceived. When I say lobby, many people think about those shady, smoky backing rooms where all those deals and bribes happen. I'm not denying this is also a practice in the sector, but I'm saying there's just much more than that. Now, before giving my understanding of lobbying, I'd like to see what is your understanding of lobbying before that. So, if you're following me, if you're listening, raise your hand if you think Coca-Cola lobbies. Very good. Indeed, food companies, soda companies has been lobbying ever since to, maybe to advertise their product to minors, to have unfair practices in their supply chain. Fair enough. Raise your hand if you think Google lobbies. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Nobody likes Google anymore. It used to be so cool 10 years ago. Now it's like Facebook. So yes, these corporations, especially tech corporations, tend to have a very strong take on the political assets. Now, follow me. Raise your hand if you think church lobbies. That's pretty much right. Churches, for example, might want to lobby to have tax decor. So Scientology church wants to be recognized as a church to pay less taxes. So they lobby. How about countries? Raise your hand if you think countries lobby. Yes, they do. Every year, European member states need to negotiate their financial framework with the European Commission, and they lobby to have maybe a better take or a more suitable position for their practices. Cities. Raise your hand if you think city lobbies. That's also very common. The Olympic Games, for example, or any other big pool of money that an entities might be giving. For example, you might know the European Capital of Youth or Culture. These are money that cities want to get to. And so they might be lobbying the institutions to get that money. Now, final question. Raise your hand if you think citizens can lobby. Fair enough. So by now, you might have figured yourself that lobbying isn't bad in and out of itself. It's just a practice. When it comes to citizens, the effect might be quite powerful. And here I'd like to show you Max Schramm's. I don't know if you know their story. Max is an activist. He was an Austrian lawyer. He went to study to US. He realized that Facebook has very impactful bad practices on privacy and data. And so he came back to Europe. He got his project fundraised, and he managed to set in motion a judicial procedure against Facebook Ireland, which is the holding for Facebook in Europe, which led to the GDPR, so the new regulation that protects European data. That was impressive. It's just a single guy, it's just an activist, but he managed to put a gigantic company as Facebook on their knees following judicial avenues, so a judicial procedure. Alejandro Cavillo, we have a different example coming from Mexico. Mexico tends to have a very high child obesity due most likely to soda taxes and bad dietary behavior. Alejandro Cavillo was an advocate, and he managed to push the soda tax, a tax that is imposed on unhealthy beverage, in this case colas or energy drinks, especially when they are targeting children. Again, this is a very similar situation. He was just an activist. He puts his position in the public arena, and then people and founders were able to pick his battle and to found his battle and to elevate it up to the governmental sphere. So these are just examples of how citizens can actually effectively lobby. Now, what if people could access the same tool that Coca-Cola would have? What if civil society organization or NGO as such, so representative of society, could be as professional, as impactful as Facebook is when it speaks to the government? Or what if NGOs could team up with corporations? Most of the times NGOs are really very happy to speak with other NGOs and maybe less inclined to speak with corporation or the CSR department of some corporations. So we believe that this is possible. We believe there is a win-win in this space. How do we do this? We do it in several ways. With the limited time I have at my disposal, I just would like to point at two of the ways that we enact. The first one is legal pro bono. A lot of law firms have to give pro bono, mandatory. Pro bono means you're just giving it for free. So you're giving legal consulting for free. Many law firms have mandatory requirement for this pro bono, so we match make NGOs with these law firms, which is also a very difficult discussion sometimes. Lawyers speak legalese and sometimes they cannot really understand the strategy or the vision of certain NGOs and vice versa. The second way we used to do is training and education. That's the part I cover in my capacity of education manager at The Good Lobby. I teach lobby. I teach NGOs to be better at lobby. And this turns out to be extremely impactful. NGOs are an important and acknowledged actor in the debate. They are part of the negotiation. They are part of the policy-making process. They might as well be good when they do it. Here I'll give you just some example. So what we do is to match make during masterclass NGOs and lawyers. So we ask NGOs to pitch an idea. Maybe your NGO wants to sue a country for a misimplementation of a directive. I don't know, migration. Maybe an NGO wants to sue Viktor Orban's Hungary lack of respect of human basic rights towards the migration issue. Or maybe an NGO wants to impose a mandatory recycling quota for plastic. And maybe they can sue the European Court of Justice, they can sue a member state to the European Court of Justice to implement a legal action for the public good. Also, another way, we have the toolkit. The toolkit is literally just a set of rules and a step-by-step guide that gets you from your issue into an applicable lobbying practice. Now, this is hideously complicated. It takes me an afternoon to explain this to an NGO, so I don't expect you to understand it in 5 minutes, but that's sort of the idea. So you take an issue, it may be anything, from reducing smoking in public areas to fight LGBT discrimination, and you decline it into a manageable chunk, an action, a policy action that you can actually communicate to a policymaker. This action can be pursued through different avenues. You might as well want to do a campaign, you want to raise awareness, maybe you have Twitter followers that might want to join your campaign. As much as a petition could be a great way. Petition are legislative tools. When citizens write a petition and you have, I don't know, 50,000 signature, policymakers have to take into account this. They cannot dismiss people's volunteer. They say politicians are leaders, politicians are followers, and if enough people would ask, they will have to follow. Administrative avenues, FOIA, freedom of access of information. Citizens had the right to see the documents. If you didn't like the EU-Turkey deal that Merkel struck with Erdogan with migration, you can rightfully ask for that document. You can put your hand on it, give it to journalists, and make a story. You might file a complaint, an official complaint to the Ombudsman, which is an institution of the European Union that checks and makes balance between the use or misuse of powers between the institutions. I will bring an example later. Legal challenge, you can sue countries for the misimplementation of basic principles. We have it now with Poland. They are going against the rule of law. They are undermining the judicial power of the country, basically undermining democracy. And to join the EU, you need to be a democracy. Basic stuff, but going against a country in a political way You might lose. Your government is still very powerful. It will still communicate in a strong way. Finally, you have the political avenue. So you meet politicians, you write open editorial, op-ed, and you try to add to the contribution. I'll give you an example. Raise your hand if you are aware of the story of the Italian boat, Mediterraneo, that was stopped in the Mediterranean, the Aquarius. So unfortunately, I am from Italy, and now Italy is a terrible country to live in. That's my personal position. The political situation in my country is terrible, and now we turn to be extremely xenophobe and populist. So the Minister of Interior, Matteo Salvini, stopped a boat in the Sicily port, in one of the ports of Sicily, and basically just kept these migrants hostage for like more than 2 weeks because he didn't want them to come back to Italy. That was a very political strong action. He was communicated about it constantly, and it was gaining a lot of attention. But then the Tribunal of Agrigento, a city in Sicily, sued him for this illegal practice. This is a crime. And a Minister of Interior is ultimately a civil servant. It's our guy. It's a public affair person. So he's bound to the rules of the game. He's bound of the rules of the Italian state. So you can use them and be stronger than any tweet you could send or any campaign you could organize. It sounds complicated because it is complicated, but it at least offers the chance to NGOs to do better. Every time we speak about campaigning to NGOs, they know how to do it. They've been doing campaign ever since. But what they might not know is that they might have legal pro bono to make their cause stronger, or they can go, they can be more impactful within their goal. We also network a lot. This is an event we organize in Bulgaria in the context of the rotating European presidency. We wanted to teach the toolkit to students, to NGOs, to politicians, and basically everyone that is involved in the policymaking process, so society at large. The theory of change simply states that better informed people make better policymaking. If people know where to look at, they will find stuff. They will go through the accounts of a politician to see how they spend their money. They will go through the minutes of the meeting to see whom they talk with. As I said, I'm a lobbyist myself, and I am in the transparency register of the European Union. Every time I have a meeting with the Commission, you guys know. And you can go online and have this information at any time. You know who I'm meeting, what's the subject of my meeting, how long was the meeting, the attachment of the email I sent. So, as a matter of fact, Europe is one of the most transparent political systems ever. Don't expect to find a similar transparency in Russia, China, or even in member states. So the idea is that if people care more, policymaking is improving, and that's a big deal because now we have the European election next year, and the electoral turnout will be extremely low. We know in countries such as Slovakia, only 40% of people will show up. And that's a bad thing because it means that the politician they will elect, they will only represent 40% of Slovakian. So there's a legitimacy gap. We want to have better policy making, especially in the European context, as much as at the member states. In the past 3 years, the Good Lobby is relatively young. We managed to train more than 400 citizens, all representative of civil society. We have a loose network of around 10,000 people. We facilitate 15 NGOs pro bono matchmaking projects, and we keep giving workshops. So part of my job is also to go at member state level to teach how Europe works and how to hack European political system. I'll give you some example of success stories. The Good Lobby, together with the 7 citizens that raise your hand if you know what's the European Citizen Initiative. Fantastic, nobody knows. European Citizen Initiative, it's a tool, a legal tool that exists, been existing for 10 years. And it says that if a big enough number of citizens in Europe ask something, Europe has to take that into consideration. We were the first one to file the European Citizen Initiative on the end of roaming charges. So that ended up, it was a political process that rolled out later on, and they ended up to abolish roaming charges. We lost the initiative ourselves. You need a tremendous amount of signature to go through that, but we started a political process. The press picked it up, politicians picked it up, and so you raise awareness on this issue. José Barroso, you remember the former European Commissioner? Raise your hand if you remember José Barroso. Okay, so he was the former European Commissioner President. Immediately after his cool-off period, he wanted to go work for Goldman Sachs. Politician, they cannot vote for private companies after 19 months the end of their mandate. It's called cool-off period. The day after this cool-off period was terminating, Barroso wanted to go work for Goldman Sachs, a big investment firms that many people consider being one of the initiator of the 2008 bank crisis. So we said no. So we filed a complaint to the European Ombudsman saying this is, morally unethical, and that went through. It takes a month for a citizen to file a complaint, an official complaint to an institution, but it takes an afternoon of a good lawyer to draft this statement. Antoine Deltour, LuxLeaks. Are you aware? Raise your hand if you're aware of this scandal. Very well. As soon as Jean-Claude Juncker, current president of the European Commission, was elected, like a month after, a big scandal happened in Luxembourg with regards to tax fraud, the usual. So banks were having a particularly low interest rate for companies. Luxembourg can be considered a fiscal heaven for certain areas. And of course, the president of Luxembourg at that time, Jean-Claude Juncker, knew. So this guy, Antoine Deltour, blew the whistle. So it was one of the two whistleblowers that notify and signal this fraudulent behavior from the Luxembourg state, and we help him defending his cause. Glyphosate. Raise your hand if you know glyphosate. Okay, the glyphosate debate is about pesticide. This happens to be a very vicious one, so the European Greens, the political party, asked us what's the legal liability of releasing the EFSA report on glyphosate. EFSA is the European Food and Safety Authority. So this is something that it can make a huge impact if you're an NGO and you want to report and signal the misbehavior of companies, but you need a good lawyer for it. If you release a document of that kind, they will go after you. So you need to be thorough. This is something that can be done with us, with the good lobby, with pro bono, legal pro bono. These are some other examples of organizations we work with, from WWF to BEUC, the European Consumer Organization. We either work on a doc project, they ask us to follow simple legal trajectory, or they ask us to develop strategy altogether. And all in all, we're helping, empowering society to know better how politics works so that they can be more influential. I want to close with my two initial points and statements. I'd like to stress that lobbying is not bad in and of itself, it's just communication. If I would be using lobby tools to consumer, it'd be called marketing. But I'm using it to policymakers, so it's called lobbying, or advocacy, how they like to distinguish the two items. So lobbying is not really bad in and of itself, it's just a tool that can be used and shared with other parts of society to empower them. This is particularly interesting when you give it to citizens. When citizens understand how big corporation works and to use the same tools to raise their voice and to be heard. So I thank you for your time. I will now open a quick Q&A and go visit our website on the Good Lobby and let us know what you think. Thank you.